Welcome to Unscripted with IMF.
This is the podcast that covers leadership, relevant hot topics, encouragement, stories, and the future of the church.
This is a space for ministry leaders to learn how to ignite change and inspire growth wherever you serve, because IMF exists to serve those who serve others.
Now let's get into today's episode of Unscripted with IMF.
You know, churches have lots of sacred cows.
Oh, yeah.
And I always say sacred cows make good hamburgers.
Yep.
You know, because they've typically been there for a while. They've been out to pasture. They're all nice and fat and marbly now, so we just eat them.
Grill them up.
Grill them up.
Hey, welcome to the We Bring Life podcast, where we discuss stories and topics that will bring you life in your faith and in every area. And today I'm joined by Pastor John, our lead pastor here at Freshwater Church. My name is Zach, and so we're going to talk about a fun topic today.
Hello, Pastor Zach.
Hi, John. I like your shirt.
Thank you. Your shirt's black.
It's nice. You got your combat vets, but I like that as a collar. Like it's like you're kind of being fancy
like
for
I'm
your biker gang.
sophisticated, yet rugged.
I like it.
Classy,
Good.
yet willing to take risks.
That's fantastic.
Humble, yet confident.
So humble.
Strong, confident.
Do you practice that in the mirror
Peaceful.
every day? This is morning prep talk. So today I got coffee because we just ate a big lunch, and I feel like that may have been a mistake. So I need this caffeine because we went to a buffet.
True. And we won.
We did. We sure did. They lost money on that one. All right, so we're talking about leadership in the church and the nonprofit world today, which this is definitely your wheelhouse, your area of expertise for a number of reasons. One, your doctorate is in leading larger organizations, and then you also have almost 30 years of experience in leading in the church nonprofit setting. You lead here at Freshwater. You also lead IMF. But you want to give a quick explanation of what IMF is?
Yes, because no one knows what IMF is. IMF means International Ministerial Fellowship. So imfservice.org. What we are is a fellowship of pastors, missionaries, parachurch workers. There's about 1,600 of us around the world. And so I lead that organization. We have a staff team, paid staff, about 16 people. Our headquarters is in Excelsior, Minnesota. And now we're expanding pretty rapidly, actually, globally. Most recently in Africa. We're in about 7 countries there right now.
That's awesome. And so you do a lot of support, ordination,
Yes.
Legal counsel, even for churches. You do a lot of chaplain work.
Yes, a lot of chaplain work. Our vision is to serve those who serve others in frontline Christian ministry.
Yeah.
That's what we do. And we have about 450 chaplains that are part of it, about 300 military chaplains. We're one of the top 4 largest endorsing agencies for the U.S. Army.
That's super cool.
Which means that everyone who goes into chaplaincy needs to have an endorsement, which means that someone who went through their training, helped them along the way, filled out their DD forms. It's called the DD form 2088. They help them to fill that paper. I think it's 2088 or maybe it's something else. But anyways,
I won't fact check you. It's
no,
okay.
Don't fact check that one because that might be my discharge papers because I can't remember all the acronyms. But anyways, that's what we do. We provide support, encouragement to these pastors. So I work with a lot of boards, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of pastors, just doing leadership training, coaching, facilitating, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. So this is an area that you are definitely an expert in. You've led a lot.
I don't know if I'm an expert, but I like it.
I'm going to call you an expert. So today in 2024, leadership has evolved a lot over, the past, 20, 30, 40 years, different generational turnover, but where we're at with technology and organizations and the church, the post-COVID world, all of that. So what do you got for us on leadership in the church and nonprofit world?
What kind of a direct question do you want to ask?
No, I was going to start with an open-ended vague one.
Vague.
I just said the topic in a question.
Okay, well,
that was my open door.
I'm going to take it and run from there.
I figured you would.
Because, I
Green light.
have 30
Have
years
at
of
it.
experience. It doesn't mean anything.
28.
You know what? People can say they're experienced drivers, and they're still terrible after like 40 years.
That's true.
So I'm convinced you can be in ministry your whole life and never really be effective at it.
Valid point.
So I think as leaders, one of the things that we have to do is we always have to keep developing and be aware of the culture that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not aware of the culture that you live in, you quickly become a dinosaur. In fact, I recently visited a couple of churches. One church that I visited, I won't say the name of it, and I love the church. I love it. So anything I talk about, it's to help the church. It's to help grow and make disciples. It's not ever to badmouth. I learned a long time ago, you never grow a church by badmouthing another church. But when we talk to leaders and we talk about the church reaching the next generation, I recently took a group of Pastoral Leadership Institute students out, and we went to 2 different churches, and both of them said, and they were older pastors, older meaning older than me, yeah, Zach, believe that or not, yeah, that's really old.
That's like foot in the grave.
And it is, yeah, they were just barely kicking, but anyways, so I went to these churches, and both of them, apart, different denominations, said, we don't have any young people here. One said, we have one family that has 2 children that are younger. That was it. Out of these 2 churches, they had 2 kids, 2 churches.
Wow.
That only had 2 children. And I was at another church in another state, and the worship leader was 93 years old.
Wow.
I mean, I was impressed that he was up there. He had to get help stepping up. It was one step onto the low platform. It's a very historic church, wonderful church. The pastor was in his 70s.
Man.
And Kathy and I, in our 50s, were the youngest people there.
Wow.
And the pastor stood up and said, we need to figure out how to reach young people. And about 50 things came to mind when I was sitting there, because everything in the church screamed, we were relevant in 1968.
Yeah.
And because they got stuck. They got stuck using the same songs, the same music, the same dress code, the same program, or lack of program, the same. It was like just a true time capsule. And really, the church isn't about me, and it's not about you. It's about how we can reach the next generation. And so many leaders think, if I just take care of my people. Well, they're not really your people first and foremost, they're God's.
Yep.
But why are we just looking what's within our walls? And the church has become irrelevant, not because God is irrelevant, but because the church has stopped reaching people who need Jesus. And the interesting thing is Gen Z or millennial, not millennials, but Gen Z, you're millennial.
Yep.
So it's after you, Zach.
Yeah, we get to start complaining about
There's
the next
another
generation.
generation.
Now. Not mine.
That generation is hungry for God and skeptical of the church. But they're more hungry for God than millennials, and far more so than Gen Xers like myself. They're hungry for God and skeptical of the church. And so we have to say, why is that? We have to dig into that question and say, why are they skeptical of the church? And this all goes back again to leadership. It's why are they skeptical of the church? And so you do some research, you look up, you go to places like Barna, other great organizations that compile a lot of this data and help us to put it together. But they would say, the church is definitely dated. A lot of them would say that. And here, I did find some research. This is one of the top, let me just give you some of the top reasons why people want to go to a church, if I can find it here. I do actually have notes today. Normally I don't.
I'm impressed.
But I took some notes out. Here's what people are looking for. It says, this is out of a Barna report called Making Space for Church Visitors. The question is, imagine sitting in a Christian church, which of the following would you be most likely to feel? So it's, how do people feel? Well, Christians and non-Christians, most likely, they want to feel peaceful. They want to feel a connectedness to God. They want to feel hopeful, welcomed, and safe. Those are all almost equal, whether it's Christian or non-Christian people answering the question. They want to feel comforted, joyful, connected to others, at home, valued, included, and in awe. 16% of the respondents said they want to feel in awe. So that's what people are looking for. They're looking for a sense of community. So the question is, how as a leader can you create an environment that is conducive to what people need? So how do we do that?
That's a great question.
I was asking you, how do we do that?
You're supposed to be the expert, so I thought you were going to tell me. You're such an expert, you come up with your own questions to answer. But
Okay.
that's a great question, because that's the challenge. I mean, like what you're saying is that you have to be aware of the culture that you're in. You have to stay relevant and keep reaching young people as a church to push into those generations and looking at the younger generation and what they want And that's, I mean, that those answers you just read, that's a collective kind of age thing. But when you look at that generation, like, yeah, they're searching for a sense of hope, of to be connected to God and to others, to be in awe, for the spiritual, the sacred to be real and not just a social club.
Right. They want to be a part of something.
Yeah.
And unintentionally, many churches exclude people before they even invite them in.
Mm-hmm.
They put up barriers, whether it's a cultural barrier, you don't look like us, you don't act like us, you maybe you're from a different socioeconomic status than we are. And so we automatically shut people out, or we judge them. And that's, people feel judged all the time. A church isn't a place where people should feel judged. You know, non-Christians primarily think in terms of God's wrath and then his grace. But we have that backwards. We should think primarily in terms of God's grace. Yep. And God's wrath means that he is a holy and just God, and he wants what's best for us. And sin is not what's best for us. So he doesn't want us to sin because he knows what's best for us.
Yeah.
But non-Christians think the church is all about wrath. Like, God's going to condemn me. God's going to strike me dead when I walk in the doors of a church. You know, God hates me for what I've done. No, that's not it. We should lead with God loves you unconditionally. You were created by him, and he loves you.
Yep.
So first and foremost, we lead with God's grace. Second is, this is what God says, this is the best way for us to live. And then we point out the truth and say you can have a beautiful life if you understand that you're walking with God, fulfilling God's plans for you, his purpose, and that's where you're going to find peace. But in many churches, we lead with this condemnation, shame, guilt. And honestly, the Gen Z, that's something that dissuades them from walking through the doors of a church. Now, let's bring that back to leadership. What is it, in my opinion here, that I think that you need to do as a leader in a Christian community in order to reach people for Christ? So what do we do? That's a good question. How do we act? How do we respond? So I jotted down a couple of things. One is a leader has to have integrity. People can sniff out a fake.
Yep.
And as Zach, you and I had this conversation at one point. We talked about even when you came into ministry or when I came into ministry, a leader always led with like authority. It was command and control, authority. Yep. And that has changed. Yep. In the 30 years since I've been pastoring, not quite 30 years, 20,
you could round
give or
up.
take, 28.
Basically half a century.
Whatever. So, yeah, it's a long time now. So now we don't lead with this command and control and you will respect me. That's kind of the military type leadership where you're an officer, you're in for 2 weeks, and some staff sergeant who's been in for 20 years is supposed to respect your judgment. That's all given leadership, like it's the title. In a church, that does not work. You know, if you go around demanding, you will respect me because I have the title of a pastor, you're going to turn people off right away. So now it's all about leading with integrity and bringing people with you. So not only do we lead with integrity and let our actions line up with our intentions, we also need to be transparent in how we lead. Like, what are we good at and where are we weak? What do we struggle with? People don't just want to hear how wonderful the pastor is. You know, really that's like shining the spotlight on yourself, and you should always shine the spotlight on Jesus. That's not to say that you're always terrible at everything, but it's to say that by God's grace you were able to succeed in this, or by God's grace he helped you overcome this or go through this. So leaders have to be transparent. So it's having integrity in how you lead people. It's also being transparent. Third is having a servant heart. People are not a tool to be used. We should come alongside of people and love them and care about them and serve them. You think about it, when Jesus washed his disciples' feet, he washed Judas' feet.
Absolutely.
And that always blows me away because he knew who was going to betray him. He knew what Peter would say, yet he chose to be a servant. This wasn't compromising, you know, his integrity. He just put on the towel of a servant. And as Christian leaders, we need to model this.
And that John 13 passage, Jesus washing the disciples' feet, for years, that's always been such a vivid picture to me of having a servant heart and servant leadership. Because what you're saying is that Jesus washed Judas's feet. And if you read the story, he does that, and then he sits down and actually calls Judas out that he's about to betray him. So Jesus knew, and I would say, of course, being his divine nature, like he knew that, but he did that. And how many of us as leaders would be like, okay, I'm going to kick Judas out first, then I'm going to wash the feet of the faithful ones that I know are going to stay in it. But Jesus didn't do it that way.
Right.
You know, he really humbled himself
Right.
and washed even Judas's feet, the feet that he was about to go use to betray him and send him to the cross.
I think that a thriving church, I'll just say a thriving church is often a very messy church. Messy because you've got people from all ages, races, backgrounds, and it's kind of this, you come as you are. So you've got, whether you have tattoos or no tattoos or done time or previous addiction or current addiction, when you're showing the love of Christ, it's messy. It's kind of that. It's just messy, and that's where the church thrives. Where the church dies is when it tries to pretend to be all polished. So if the church is all polished, if we kick out all the sinners, well, there's not going to be anybody left in the church, including the pastor, mind you.
Did you know that IMF offers the ability for you to complete continuing professional education credits? Well, we do. In partnership with the Institute for Clinical Pastoral Training, we are an approved CPE provider. For more information or to enroll for CPE units, visit imfserves.org/CPE Center. That's imfserves.org/CPE Center.
Here's another one for leadership is you need to have sustainable systems. Well, pastors, by and far, most of them don't understand what a sustainable system is. Because when you have a pastor's heart, you shepherd people, you care about them, you empathize with them, you minister to them. But there's the business side of the church, if you will. And that's not the bad side. Jesus had a treasurer with them. He had, they paid their taxes, they got food. That's the other side of the church. And you need to have sustainable systems. Just like in your house, you've got an HVAC system that takes care of your temperature. You've got an electrical system for your power needs. You have water, so that you have drainage, water coming in, water going out. All of those are systems. In a church, you need to have sustainable systems, so that when someone, maybe the easiest way to explain this is a job description. Like you have your guests or your first impressions team. That's a system. That's how you welcome people into the church. You have a worship team. That's another system. And how do you encourage and lead people in worship? You have a missions system. It's how do you sustainably fund missionaries around the world? You have your leadership development pipeline. That's how do you develop leaders into the church. A system also includes your language. So a language as in, if you're a coach, we use the terms here, which you're familiar with. You're an individual, you're a volunteer, you're a leader, you're a coach, a director, or a pastor. Those are the levels that we have. And we use that same language from youth ministry to children's ministry to first impressions. That's a system. So every ministry doesn't have their own language. That causes enormous confusion, especially if you're trying to grow a church. For small churches, it's all about relationships. But as you get beyond the 80-person church, you need to have sustainable systems. So that's important.
And really what I see in that, as you're describing these different systems and the language, is really that's intentionality. That as you grow and as you lead in a church or a nonprofit setting, that to keep growing and to keep reaching people, you have to be intentional with what you're doing to be able to multiply it, to raise up leaders, like we're saying with our language, that we have that consistency. And that's such an important part.
Yeah, they used to say that every organization, whether business, church, or whatever, whenever you grew by 30%, you had to rethink how you did management. So you had to restructure all your management teams. I would say now that whenever you grow by 15%, you need to rethink that. It's faster now. So it used to be 30%, that was the gold standard, like you grow by 30%, you need to change. Now it's 15%. And I will add that it goes both ways. In other words, if you grow by 30%, you need to rethink, or 15% now, you need to rethink your systems and structures.
Yeah.
And if you decrease in attendance by 15%, you need to rethink your systems and structures. I've done much consulting with churches that have gone from pre-pandemic, they might be 500, 300, whatever. Post-pandemic, they're down 40%. They're still trying to keep the same staff going, doing the same thing. And what they miss is the culture has changed.
Yeah.
So the same person that did kids ministry before that had 50 kids in there now has 15. So the focus shouldn't be the same. You don't need the same amount of teachers. You know, same with AV, audio video has increased dramatically post-pandemic. Many churches still can't seem to find a budget for that. When really that ship sailed already. Like that's gone. So you need to rethink whether you go up or down. It's basically sizing the congregation and staffing it appropriately. And it's not all paid staff. I remember I hear pastors oftentimes tell me, if I had all your staff, I could do all kinds of stuff. I'm like, yeah. You know, we started with me and Kathy, and we were lucky if we had like 3 other couples that joined the church. So we started with nothing. The biggest, most advantageous thing a pastor can do is treat your volunteers as volunteer staff. Like treat them as your staff team.
Yep.
Yes, things might go a little bit slower, but include them in the process. They want to be included in it. Doesn't matter if they're paid or not. Like at Freshwater, we treat all of our volunteers as they are part of our team.
Yeah.
They wear the same shirts as our staff does. We give them name tags, and it says right on there, volunteer, director, coach, like so they can be readily identifiable.
Yep.
But so we've always had to adjust our systems, which has been challenging.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you're not looking at it, pastors miss this.
Yeah, and I would really, it's something I've been thinking and reading and hearing a lot lately, is I would call that dignity, that we give those volunteers dignity in what they're doing and treating them truly like a staff member.
Correct.
And that dignifies and gives weight and honor to what they're doing. Because I think in the leadership realm, when it comes to being in a church and a nonprofit, I would never say it really this bluntly, but I'm going to, that we have this layer of, we want people to come and partake, but also to donate, to tithe, to give, to fund it, and then to volunteer to work for us for free. You know, like that's a whole nother added layer. It's not like it's a company where like, okay, you're struggling just to have employees that you're paying to be there. We really need people to pay to be here and to pay to work for us. Like that's, I mean, it's crass, but that's really the struggle of it. And I think that dignity piece of what you're saying, the way you're portraying that is a key to it.
Right.
In honoring people.
Right. And to expand on that, it's not just volunteering in the church. Part of Christian leadership is getting people to volunteer outside the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because don't just need to let your light shine in the church. Let it shine outside the church too, by being a coach, working at a food shelf, volunteering at the hospital. That, again, goes back to being a servant. And we need to have servants. So, and I think that if you operate with a scarcity mentality that we don't have enough, and you hear people stand up and say, we need more kids volunteers, because kids ministry turns over at least 30 to 40% of their people every year. So they're always the highest need for volunteers.
Yep.
And sometimes people stand up and go, we need you, that's begging.
Yeah.
And that's operating out of scarcity. So we should operate out of abundance, that, hey, God has given us this many kids. It's a joy and a privilege to serve them. You know, if you want to be a part of this amazing team, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then people go, wow, that's pretty cool. God's grown that ministry and they need help. I can see that.
Yep.
And it's getting people in their area of giftedness too. Because some people should not work with kids. Like they're just, they're angry, ornery, don't like kids. You know, that's where you get this stereotypical old church lady. You know, the one's like, you calm down, you sit down.
Yeah.
Like you don't want that. Just like you don't want to force an introvert to be a greeter at the door. They're just going to stand there and cry. Like that. What kind of a greeter is that? So it's finding people just a place to call home in their area of gifting. Yeah. So that's huge. But anyways, that was sustainable systems.
Yep.
And I want to change a little bit to the leader here. A leader in the nonprofit and church world has to have the ability to make decisions. That is because many, like churches, we all have good hearts. We want to help people. We care about them. But sometimes you have to make a decision that will offend people. And whenever you're leading, it means that people will either like it or not like it.
Yeah.
You really don't have a choice. But by not making a decision, you really made a decision. And I've seen many churches get stagnant because either one of the donors says, if you do this, I'm not going to give anymore. Or they say, you know what, if you do this, I'm not going to serve anymore. Or if you don't do this, this will happen. But when you're leading a church or a nonprofit, you have to make decisions. And you have to be okay that some people aren't going to be okay with it.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. And in a larger organization, there's always, and actually in every church, there's always low-level grumbling about various things. I don't like this, or I don't like that, or he said, she said. There's always low-level grumbling. That's humanity. Humanity is all about grumbling. But a leader needs to discern what's low-level grumbling and what's a real issue that needs to be addressed. And then you have to present a solution. You have to somehow solve it and lead.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to someone that needs to make some decisions? Because we open by saying how leadership has changed, that it's not this command and control, just be the dominant leader, this is what we're doing. It is this whole different integrity, transparency, servant heart, but you still have to make decisions.
So don't make decisions in isolation or in an echo chamber. Isolation means that you make them all yourself. In echo chambers, you surround yourself with everybody who just loves you and tells you how great you are. Because all they're going to do is repeat what you already said. That's an echo chamber. You know, if you have your mom, your brother, your uncle, and your dog all on your board, that's an echo chamber. So good leaders are going to surround themselves with people who actually have opinions, who think things through, who have the ability to say, I don't think that's a good decision, or I think this is a good decision. And then you just wrestle that through, but you don't do it in isolation. And if you don't have those leaders in your church now or in your organization now, get outside help. That's why we have consultants. That's why we work with outside groups, and that it's good. They can help you make decisions because they don't have emotions attached. They don't have family history attached. You know, churches have lots of sacred cows. And I always say sacred cows make good hamburgers, you know, because they've typically been there for a while. They've been out to pasture. They're all nice and fat and marbly now, so we just eat them.
Grill them up.
So, it can be tough, but surround yourself with good people who will offer wisdom and insight. And that's all goes back to integrity, transparency, a servant heart, and sustainable systems. And then my last one is to build a great team. You're like, well, I only have 20 people. Well, start now. Build a great team.
And how would you build a great team?
I would find, this is stuff I learned and then later applied, but as you find people who have a willing heart, they're hungry, they want to be spiritually mature, they're learning, and just invite them in and start working with them on leadership. And, you'll develop them. If you look at Jesus' 12 apostles or disciples, and I'd ask my listeners here, how many of them can you name? No, I'm not asking you. I'm saying how many of our listeners can name all 12? I bet you a handful, if that. But you know who you know? You know Peter, James, John, Matthew. Jesus invested in all these people, but not all of them ended up producing that many lasting results. Some of them went into different roles. So when you pour into people, not everyone is going to become the leader that you want them to be. So, you invest in 5 people, maybe 2 of them end up really just knocking it out of the park, and the other 3 end up serving in some capacity, but they just don't have the ability or desire to develop as a leader. And that's okay. That's how God's wired them. They still have a valuable place in the body of Christ. But the worst thing you can do is force them to lead people when they don't want to lead people.
Yeah, that's good. So to be a leader, you got to make decisions and build a great team. You build a great team by finding those with a willing heart that are hungry, and then you develop them and be okay with them being in different capacities within that.
Right.
And I think that's something that we've strive. How do you say the past tense of strive? We strove. We did that a lot here, and we still do it. And that's important. And I think building a great team, a huge part of that is raising people up from within. That our biggest success has been in that, primarily through people that are hungry, that are willing to buy in, to lean into it. And when you give them a shot and you raise them up, and it goes in different directions, like you're saying, but that leads to such a great impact. for the organization, be it a church or a nonprofit. So a leader needs to make decisions, build a great team.
Build a great team. There's always lag time. Lag time is when you find someone who you know is going to be a great leader. You just believe it. You prayed about it. They prayed about it. Between when they start and when they're ready, that can take time.
That's good.
Sometimes years. Other times, like my friend Larry Osborne says, you can throw someone in the deep end, but you got to sit by the edge of the pool. So if you're going to put someone in a big ministry position, you better sit by the edge of the pool so they don't drown.
Yeah.
You got to be close to them, help them, walk with them, debrief with them. That's all very important, and that takes time. But that goes back to leading with integrity, having this servant heart, and I think that's what really does grow the church. It's not just about standing up front and delivering a message every week.
Yep.
Honestly, people can get great preaching anywhere on the web now.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're all biblically accurate, but I mean, there are some great, phenomenal speakers out there that, all of the people, you have access to them, everyone else does too.
Yep.
So they can go listen to them during the week. That's great. You be the best preacher you can be. You find your own voice. You are not, any of the top 10 most wanted pastors. Like, that's okay. You be you, and you build a solid team based on your context, your church.
Yep.
I read once in a stat that said that 60% of the people that stay in a church already made their decision to stay before they even heard the sermon.
Yep.
So it was because the people they met, the love that goes back to that list of peace, joy, a sense of awe, they feel that.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. Awesome. Well, thank you, Pastor John, for sharing on leadership in the church and the nonprofit world. I appreciate your almost 30 years of expertise.
Almost 30 years. It's like 28, but who's counting?
24 of them were good. Anyway.
Yeah, probably 15, 10. But anyways,
I was trying to shoot high. But no, I appreciate these words of wisdom, and thank you for joining us for the We Bring Life podcast. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening today. If you found value in this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with others. Don't miss the next one. We release new episodes every first and third Thursday of the month. We serve those who serve others in Frontline Christian Ministry. So for more information, visit us at imfserves.org.